Daniel is 32. Not the lazy and broke type, more like the kind of person who got trapped in a life that keeps moving but never improves. Every night at exactly 8 p.m., he clocks in at a textile warehouse wearing a faded uniform, worn-out shoes, and the same quiet pressure in his chest. His shift runs until 6 a.m. He walks his rounds, checks the cameras, listens to the low hum of machines, and keeps his eyes open while the world sleeps. It's the kind of job where nobody applauds you for doing it right. One mistake gets you blamed, but doing your duty is treated like it's nothing.
When morning comes, Daniel heads home feeling like someone unplugged him. His apartment is so small you could stretch your arms and touch both walls. A broken fan, a mattress on the floor, one flickering light bulb that seems to lose power the same way his life does. His paycheck covers rent, cheap food, and one comforting lie: just make it through one more month. But the poorest thing about Daniel isn't his bank account, it's his hope. On his walk home, when the town is still asleep, he passes windows glowing with other people's lives. Families eating breakfast, kids tying shoes, men in clean shirts heading to offices, laughter, normalcy. Daniel watches it like it belongs to a different universe, and one thought keeps looping in his mind. Is this going to be my life forever?
He tried to change. He applied for better jobs and got rejected because he lacked skills. He told himself he'd learn something new, but after working all night, his brain didn't want growth, it wanted sleep. And the truth is, Daniel wasn't lazy. He worked hard. The problem was he was working hard inside a life that wasn't going anywhere. If you're listening right now, do this simple thing. Don't look down on Daniel like he's somebody else. Use him as a mirror. Because people who live at a higher level aren't always luckier. They're just awake enough to realize this. Effort isn't the issue. Direction is.
And right when Daniel thought he'd be stuck forever, one phone call hit him like a punch and forced him to wake up for real. Daniel tried to change, more times than he wants to admit. He wasn't the guy who spent his nights partying and his mornings complaining. His nights were work, real work, the kind that drains you in a way sleep can't fully repair. And still, he kept telling himself, I'm gonna fix this. I'm gonna get out. So he did what people always say to do. He applied for better jobs.
He filled out forms at 2 a.m. during quiet hours on his shift. Warehouse clerk, delivery dispatcher, junior assistant, anything with daylight, anything with a future. The responses were either silence or the same polite rejection wearing different clothes. Thank you for your interest. We chose a candidate with more experience. We're looking for someone with stronger skills. Skills. Always that word, like a locked door that everyone else had a key for. Daniel would close his phone and stare at the security monitor like it was mocking him, because he knew the truth. He couldn't argue with them. He didn't have a degree. He didn't have a network. He didn't have a portfolio of achievements. He had a job title that sounded replaceable and a life that felt like it was shrinking.
And what made it worse was this. He wasn't even failing in a dramatic way. He was failing quietly, slowly, invisibly. The kind of failure that doesn't explode, it just settles in until it becomes normal. Every morning, he'd come home around 6:30, kick off his shoes, and collapse. His body didn't rest, it shut down. Then he'd wake up around 4 p.m. with that heavy, guilty feeling, like he'd missed something important, even if nothing important was happening. That's the part people don't tell you about being stuck. It's not just being broke, it's being out of sync with life. When Daniel was awake, the world was asleep. When the world was building, he was recovering. He lived in a schedule that made growth feel impossible. Sometimes his phone would buzz while he was sleeping. Messages from old friends he barely replied to anymore. Yo, we're meeting up Saturday. Man, you disappeared. You still doing that night job? He'd read them half awake and type, yeah, I'm good, like a reflex. Then he'd roll over and go back to sleep, because explaining his life felt like admitting it. On his nights off, he tried to catch up. That meant sleeping more, scrolling more, watching videos about motivation he never acted on. He'd sit on the edge of his mattress and promise himself things with the sincerity of someone who genuinely wants to change. Starting next week, I'll wake up early. Starting next week, I'll learn something. Starting next week, I'll get serious. But next week always became next month, and next month became maybe next year, because exhaustion has a way of turning good intentions into background noise. Then there were the calls from his mother. Once a week, same time, same gentle voice, same question that landed like a stone. Daniel, when is your life going to get better? He hated that question, not because she was wrong, but because she was right, and because he didn't have an answer that didn't sound like a lie. Soon, Mom, I'm working on it. But he wasn't, not in a real way, not in a way that could change anything. He was surviving. That was it. One night during a slow shift, Daniel caught his reflection in the glass of the office window. The fluorescent light made him look older than 32. His eyes were tired. His shoulders were slumped. He looked like a man carrying a life he didn't choose, pretending it was fine. And something about that image made him angry. Not at the warehouse, not at the economy, not at his boss, at himself. Because deep down, he knew the most brutal truth of all. Hard work wasn't the problem. Hard work without a plan was. If you're listening and you've ever felt this, like you're putting in effort but getting nowhere, you already understand what Daniel was facing. This is what separates people who stay stuck from people who break out. Most people don't need more motivation. They need a system. They need a schedule that actually allows growth. They need a way to build a future without begging life for permission. Daniel didn't have that. All he had was fatigue and a quiet desperation. And then, on a cold Tuesday morning in November, his phone rang right as he was leaving work. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. Everyone in his life who cared about him already knew not to call at this hour. But something made him answer. "Daniel, it's me." It was his sister, and her voice wasn't normal. It was thin, shaky, like she was holding back panic. "Daniel, you need to come home. Mom collapsed. She's in the hospital." For a second, his brain didn't process the words. His body did. His heart dropped so fast it felt like falling. "What? When? Is she?" "Just come, please. The doctor says she's stable, but Daniel, she's not okay." Daniel stood there outside the warehouse with the morning air cutting through his shirt, staring at nothing. The sun was barely up. Cars passed. People went to work. The world kept moving like it always did. But for Daniel, everything stopped. He called a cab, then canceled it. Too expensive. He ran to the bus station, bought a ticket with money he didn't want to spend, and sat down with his hands shaking. The ride to his village took 3 hours, but it felt like a lifetime. He couldn't stop thinking about all the times he told himself, soon, all the times he delayed change, all the times he assumed there would be time later. And now later was standing at the edge of his life, holding a receipt for every excuse he'd ever made. When he arrived at the small rural clinic, the smell of disinfectant hit him first, then the sound. Quiet footsteps, distant coughing, someone crying behind a curtain. His sister met him in the hallway. Her eyes were red. "She fainted from exhaustion," she said. "The doctor said stress. She needs better food, medicine, rest." Daniel walked into the room and saw his mother lying there, thinner than he remembered, skin pale, hair messy against the pillow. She opened her eyes when he entered, and her face softened, like she was relieved he came. He sat beside her bed and took her hand. Her hand felt light, too light, like the years had taken more from her than he realized. She tried to smile, but it didn't hold. "Daniel," she whispered, and her voice was barely there. "I don't have much time left." "No, Mom, don't say that." She squeezed his fingers, weakly but with intention. "Listen to me, please. Don't waste your life like I wasted mine. Don't work yourself to death for nothing. Find a way. Promise me."
Daniel swallowed hard. His throat burned. He wanted to say, "I will." He wanted to sound strong. But all he could manage was a quiet, honest, "I promise." His mother closed her eyes, like she'd been carrying that fear for years, and finally set it down. Daniel stayed beside her long after she fell asleep. And that's when it happened, the moment his life began to shift. He looked at her hands, wrinkled, calloused, hands that worked fields for decades. The same kind of work Daniel did now. Endless effort, minimal reward, no escape. And something inside him cracked. Not sadness, rage. Rage at the idea that this was all life would be. Rage at being trapped. Rage at the way time was passing, whether he was ready or not.
He stepped outside the clinic into the early darkness. The clock on his phone read 5 a.m. The village was quiet, but not empty. A few farmers were already walking toward the fields. Birds were starting to sing. The air was cold, clean, and sharp. And Daniel stood there, breathing in dawn, realizing something terrifying and beautiful. Most of his life had been happening while he was asleep. He had been waiting for a perfect time to change, but perfect times don't exist. There is only the moment you decide you're done. He looked out at the dark horizon, and under his breath, so quietly nobody could hear, he made a decision that wasn't emotional, wasn't dramatic, wasn't motivational. It was final. "No more," he whispered. "I'm not living like this anymore." And as the sky began to lighten, Daniel didn't feel inspired. He felt awake. Now here's where you come in, because if you're still listening, you're not a spectator. You're someone who can recognize a turning point. So let me ask you a question that only high-level people answer honestly. If your life stayed exactly the same for the next 12 months, would you be proud of yourself? Because Daniel wasn't, and that's why what happened next changed everything.
Daniel rode the bus back to town with his mother's words still pressing against his ribs like a weight. The sky outside the window was turning from black to gray, and the world looked calm, almost disrespectfully calm compared to what was happening inside him. At the next stop, a man sat across from him. Mid-50s, clean jacket, calm eyes. The kind of face that doesn't rush because it doesn't have to. He held a book open with one hand, a pen in the other, as if this early hour belonged to him. Daniel recognized him immediately. Mr. Chen, a businessman in town, owned a few shops, the kind of person people described with one word, successful. And what shocked Daniel wasn't who it was the time, 6 a.m., a successful man on a regular bus at dawn. Daniel stared for a moment, then caught himself. Stop being a coward. If he was serious about changing his life, he couldn't keep acting like opportunities were for other people. He leaned forward slightly. "Excuse me, sir." Mr. Chen looked up and smiled. Not fake, not forced, just calm. "Yes?" Daniel swallowed. "Why are you on the early bus?"
Mr. Chen glanced out the window, then back at Daniel. "Because I've been awake since 4:30. I like to read, think, and plan before the world starts shouting." Daniel almost laughed. "But don't you need sleep?" "I sleep at 9 p.m., Mr. Chen said simply. 7.5 hours. That's enough." Then Mr. Chen's eyes narrowed a little. Not judging, just observing. "You look exhausted. Night shift?" Daniel nodded. "Security guard." "And when do you sleep?" "Usually around 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Mr. Chen didn't say anything for a second. Then he spoke softly, like he was stating a fact, not an insult. "So you're awake when the world sleeps, and asleep when the world builds." Daniel felt that sentence hit him in the chest, because it wasn't rude, it was true. Mr. Chen leaned forward just slightly. "Young man, I'll tell you a secret that changed my life 30 years ago. The hours between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m., those are magic hours." Daniel's eyebrows lifted. Magic? Not because of luck, Mr. Chen said, because of focus. No distractions, no noise, no excuses. That's when you can build the life you want while everyone else is still dreaming.
Daniel wanted to believe him. He did. But reality pushed back immediately. I work until 6 a.m. I'm tired. I need sleep. Mr. Chen nodded like he'd heard that 1,000 times. Then change your sleep. When you get home, sleep immediately. Wake up at 11:30. You'll survive. Then live your real life during daylight. And when you shift jobs later, keep 5 a.m. forever. Daniel stared at him. And what would I even do at 5 a.m.? Mr. Chen's smile faded. Not cold, but serious. That depends on whether you're serious. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small card, and wrote a phone number on it. Then he handed it to Daniel like it weighed something. If you truly want to change, he said, call me. I'll show you what to do with those morning hours, but only if you're willing to do what most people won't. The bus slowed as Daniel's stop approached. He looked at the card in his hand. It felt absurd, like a piece of paper couldn't possibly compete with years of exhaustion and bad habits. But then he remembered his mother's grip, her whisper, "Promise me." Daniel stood up. The doors opened. Cold air rushed in. He turned back once. "I'll call." Mr. Chen nodded. "We'll see. Most people talk. Very few act." Daniel stepped off the bus and walked towards his apartment, still holding the card. And for the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking, I hope things change. He was thinking something sharper, something higher level people understand. If I don't change this, nobody will. The next morning, Daniel's alarm exploded at 5 a.m. Not 5:07, not just 5 more minutes, exactly 5. His body reacted like it was under attack. Every muscle felt heavy. His mind instantly began negotiating like a lawyer. You worked all night. You deserve rest. 1 more hour won't matter.
That's the lie that keeps average people average. Tiny delays that feel harmless. Daniel sat up anyway. Not because he felt strong, because he remembered the clinic, his mother's hand, Mr. Chen's voice saying, "No negotiation." He stood, turned off the alarm, and for a second he just stared at the wall. His apartment was quiet, cold, still dark outside. And that's when the real battle began, the one nobody posts about. At 5:10 a.m., Daniel sat at his small table, phone propped against a cup, and opened a free Excel tutorial. His eyes burned, his attention drifted. He rewatched the same 2 minutes 3 times. His brain wasn't learning, it was resisting. By 5:40 a.m., he wanted to quit so badly he started rationalizing again. This isn't for me. I'm not smart. I'm not a morning person. But let's be real. Morning person is not a personality trait. It's a decision repeated until it becomes identity. At 6 a.m., Daniel forced himself outside for a walk. The street was empty. No noise, no drama. No one expecting anything from him. Just him and the quiet. And something about that quiet was painful, because it showed him how much time he'd wasted filling his life with noise just to avoid facing himself. By 6:30 a.m., he was back inside, breathing harder, mind slightly clearer. He opened a short article about basic accounting. The words felt slow, but they entered. At 7:15 a.m., he went to bed. He slept from about 7:30 a.m. to 2 p.m., got up, ate something cheap, and went back to the warehouse for another night shift. And then he did it again. Day 2, Day 3, Day 4. The first week wasn't motivational. It was ugly.
He was tired at work. He snapped at small things. His stomach felt off. He questioned himself constantly. But here's what changed. Daniel stopped asking, "Do I feel like it?" He started asking, "Did I do it?" That's the mindset of someone operating from a higher level. Feelings come after the work, not before. On day 6, his coworker noticed his eyes,
"You look rough. You sick?" Daniel almost laughed. "No, I'm rebuilding." His coworker shrugged, like Daniel was speaking another language. And that was fine. People who stay stuck don't understand the language of discipline. By the end of week 1, Daniel didn't feel better. He felt something more valuable. He felt in control of one thing, his morning. And once you control your morning, everything else becomes negotiable. Quick check-in. If you're still listening, don't just watch this like entertainment. Make it personal. If you had 2 quiet hours every day, what would you build? A skill? A business? A body? A new identity? Because Daniel is about to find out what most people never learn. The body fights change until it adapts, and when it adapts, you become dangerous. Around day 20, something strange happened. Daniel woke up, and his alarm hadn't even rung yet. He grabbed his phone. 4:58 a.m.
For a moment, he just sat there, confused, like his body had betrayed the old version of him. Then he smiled, a small one, private, real. Because that moment meant one thing. The hardest part was over. Not the work, the resistance. His brain stopped screaming. His body stopped panicking. The morning became normal. And that's when the learning started to compound. Excel wasn't random anymore. The formulas connected. His hands moved faster. He understood how to organize data, track inventory, create simple reports. He finished his first online certificate, then another. His morning walks stopped feeling like punishment. He began to like the sunrise, the empty streets, the feeling of being awake while the world was still quiet. More importantly, Daniel started to notice something inside himself changing. His confidence wasn't coming from compliments. It wasn't coming from luck. It came from proof. Proof that he could do something hard when nobody was watching. At work, people noticed too. "Daniel," his supervisor said one night, "you look different, more focused." Daniel didn't brag. He didn't explain the whole story. He just said, "I'm changing my life 2 hours at a time." And here's the part most people miss. The real reward isn't the promotion. It's the identity shift. Once you see yourself as someone who shows up at 5 a.m., you stop tolerating the rest of your life being mediocre. Daniel was no longer hoping. He was building. By the 3rd month, Daniel stopped being a student and started being a practitioner. He looked around the warehouse and saw what he'd never seen before. Chaos disguised as normal. Inventory was tracked like a rumor. Supplies disappeared. Numbers didn't match. Everyone complained, but nobody fixed it because that's just how it is. Daniel saw an opening. One morning, after his first hour of learning, he opened Excel and built a simple inventory sheet. Nothing fancy. Categories, dates, quantities. A clean system that made the warehouse make sense. That night, he showed it to his supervisor. At first, the supervisor acted unimpressed, like he didn't want to admit a security guard had built something useful. Then he leaned closer. "Wait, you made this?" Daniel nodded. "Yeah, it'll save time, it'll reduce mistakes." The supervisor tested it, clicked around, and his expression changed. "How did you learn this?" Daniel didn't smile like a hero. He just said the truth. "I wake up at 5 a.m. and teach myself." Word traveled fast in places where nobody expects improvement. Within a week, the warehouse manager heard about it, then the owner. And on day 87, 3 days before Mr. Chen's deadline, Daniel got called into the office. The supervisor cleared his throat, trying to sound official. "Daniel, we're expanding our accounting operations. We need someone who understands warehouse flow and can handle basic bookkeeping and reporting." Daniel's mouth went dry. The supervisor continued. "Day shift, office, double your current salary." Daniel just stood there, frozen, because the old version of him would have thought this was impossible. But the new version of him knew exactly why it happened. It wasn't luck, it wasn't talent. It was 5 a.m., repeated until reality had no choice but to change. "When do I start?" Daniel finally asked. "Next Monday." That night, Daniel walked home under streetlights that looked brighter than usual. The air felt different. Not because the town changed, because he did. He called Mr. Chen. "Mr. Chen, I did it. I didn't miss a single morning. And today I got promoted."
There was a pause. Then Mr. Chen's voice, quiet,
proud. I know. You had the look of someone who was done with excuses. Daniel swallowed. Should I stop waking up early now that I... Mr. Chen cut in gently. No, don't ever stop. That's not a tactic. That's your identity. Daniel looked at the ceiling of his tiny apartment and said something he'd never believed about himself before. I won't stop. This is who I am now. Here's what Daniel's story proves, whether you like it or not. Your life changes when your habits change. Not someday, not when conditions become perfect. It changes when you decide you're done being controlled by comfort. Most people think the gap between them and the life they want is talent, luck, or connections. It isn't. It's time, specifically how you use time when nobody is watching. Between 5 a.m. and 7 a.m., the world is quiet. No meetings, no noise, no social pressure, no distractions. Just you and the truth. That's why winners love the morning. Not because they're superhuman, but because they understand something basic. If you win the morning, you win the day. If you win enough days, you win your life. Daniel wasn't special. That's the point. He had less than you. No degree, no shortcuts, no safety net. He only had a decision and the discipline to repeat it. So the real question isn't can you do it? The question is, will you stop negotiating with your potential? So here's your challenge. Simple, but not easy. Tonight, set your alarm for 5 a.m. Not 5:15, not when I feel ready. 5:00. Put your phone across the room so you have to stand up. Then choose what you'll build in your first hour. One skill, one focus, one path. Commit to it for 90 days. And protect your sleep. Go to bed before 9 p.m. because sleep isn't the enemy. Wasted evenings are. If you're the kind of person who operates at a higher level, you don't need more motivation. You need a decision you respect. So do this right now. Hit like as your commitment and comment below, in my first hour tomorrow, I will build blank. I'll be reading the comments. And if you know someone who keeps saying, I want to change, but never moves, share this with them. Don't baby them. Wake them up. Because your future self is already awake on the other side of that alarm clock. The only question is, will you be?